Hi, and welcome to Handling Conflicts in Project Management. I'm your teacher for this training. My name is Sheila Blair. I'm a certified project management professional from the Project Management Institute. This course is about how to manage conflict related to projects. In other words, how to deliver bad news when a project goes wrong. And delivering bad news about your projects is an inevitable part of our jobs as project managers. It takes discretion, skill, it takes good judgment on how to effectively deliver bad news without leaving a path of destruction behind. So let's take a look at the types of bad news you might have to deliver. Only 2.5% of companies successfully complete 100% of their projects. And I still think that's a lie. It is very difficult to deliver a 100% project on time, on budget, and with the quality and scope of work that was originally guaranteed. So it's very difficult. So the fact that your project might not complete successfully, that could be a piece of bad news you might have to deliver. How about the average cost of overruns on projects is 27%. Can you imagine going 27% over on all of your projects? That sounds like a nightmare and a lot of bad news that you have to deliver. If this is you and you have to deliver the news about, I'm going a quarter over my budget at least every time, you probably won't be a project manager very long. Another piece of information is only 25% of all projects are successful. And when we say successful, we're talking about delivering a project that is on budget, that is on time, and that contains all of the quality and scope of work that was guaranteed. So only 25%. So that means 75% of projects fail. That's a lot of bad news. 96% of project failure is due to poor planning and execution. If you're the project manager, most of that planning and execution also falls on your shoulders. You may have to deliver information about, the different things about your project. For example, just a few statistics that prove that projects are not easy to manage and not easy to cause to come in on budget, on time, and with the same scope. The failure rate of projects with budgets over $1 million is 50% higher than the failure rate of projects with budgets below $350,000. So the greater the project budget, the better chance you're going to fail. The failure of IT projects costs the U.S. economy an average of $100 billion annually. These are crazy big numbers. Organizations that invest in proven project practices waste 28 times less money because more of their strategic initiatives are completed successfully. Ding, 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 we have a winner. This is a positive statistic. When you're using proven project management practices, you save 28 times the amount of money that you would normally spend on project management. And that means, having those project management structure, having some policies in place, maybe having a project management office at your organization, and all of those things, including training, providing training for your project managers, all of those things are things that we can provide to you through NCTS, the National Corporate Training Solutions. Sometimes you have to deliver bad news about variances in your project. Every negative variance is bad news that you have to deliver. A variance is created when there's a difference between what we had planned to do and what we actually did. And it can happen from the moment the execution of the project begins, right after the planning phase. As an example, I might have a 10-week project that I planned on costing $1,000 per week. When I checked my actual costs after the first 3 weeks, I noticed that I had already spent $5,000. So that's a variance of $2,000. I'm already $2,000 in week 3, $2,000 overspent on this project in week 3. So there's different types of variances. Variances in the requirements for this project. You might have standards that you have to meet. Standards is listed separately too. Schedules, so we're talking about time management here. Costs, variances on the risks. Are there risks taking place that we hadn't anticipated? Quality issues on our project. Are we not able to deliver the full scope of what we agreed to? Or how about variances on resources, either the materials that we needed, or this could be also human skill, the amount of labor, and so forth. There is a quick little formula on how to manage variances when you do have a variance on your project. This just gives you a step-by-step what you should do. Again, a variance is anything outside of what we had planned. So here's what we had planned to do. Here's what we actually did. The gap between is considered the variance. And this is just a step-by-step how to address variances in your project. This is a very common thing, variances. When you do find a variance, you're going to want to communicate that, whether it's, and you have to decide this. Sometimes it's just to your supervisor or project sponsor. Sometimes you'd have to deliver this to stakeholders, depending on who they are. Sometimes it's just to your project team. So it just depends on the type of variance and the impact of that variance on the project. That's what will determine who it is that you tell about that. In your communication plan that you develop in the planning stage of the project, there should be a paragraph at least about how you're going to report variances, who they should be reported to, which types of variance, and so forth. So that allows you to make sure that you're sticking to your plan by writing it down. So your communication plan is a really important piece of this whole delivering bad news. Project managers have, or at least the Project Management Institute has an expectation that their project managers are going to be very ethical and always professional. And that means when you have an issue, be honest about it and upfront, report it accurately, and also be solution focused. So when you're reporting a problem, also provide what you're going to do to fix the problem. And the reason for that is you don't want to hide things. Okay, maybe you screwed up. Maybe this is on you. Maybe it wasn't somebody else's fault. It was really your fault. And that's why you have this variance. But be upfront about it and report the variance. When you don't do that, it can cause catastrophic problems with your project. You have to be upfront and honest about problems with your project. Okay, and only then can you work to fix them, bring things back in control. Maybe you still have an opportunity to finish successfully. Trust, as described by the American Heritage Dictionary, is confidence in the integrity, ability, character, and truth of a person or thing. And trust is the genesis of leadership and is built by every action, every initiative, every word of the project manager. Developing trust with your project teams and your stakeholders is really critical to project managers. And trust works both ways. If you're in a leadership position, trust will keep you there, or the lack of trust will diminish your capabilities as a leader. A good motto is trust until you have a compelling reason to mistrust. Again, if you are developing a report and you have a variance, again, be very accurate and candid, open, and honest in your variance reporting. Some of the ways that you would do this is you might provide status reports on your project, whether it's weekly, monthly, whatever. You want to, in that status report or variance report, make sure that you talk about the results of any change requests that have come through. What variances are you dealing with? And what is the impact on the project? Some other things, or another way to put this is, for your reports, there's usually a standard of what these reports should contain. Reports give some indication of the desired outcome and whether the result is better or worse than expected. This ensures the project status continues to be aligned with the business needs, which is critical. Metrics management can be used effectively on medium and large projects because there's enough time to capture the data, analyze the results, make appropriate changes. Gathering sophisticated metrics on smaller projects is going to have a limited value unless the metrics can be leveraged at a higher level in the organization. But on this slide, you'll see what you want your communication or project status reports to contain. One, address the needs of the recipient stakeholders, meaning whoever's going to have this document in their hands. Some people prefer graphics, and tables, something that they can visually lock onto. And then other people prefer like executive summaries, paragraphs they want to read. So whatever it is that your stakeholders want to see, that's what you deliver. So maybe it's both in one document. Be deliverable focused. The point of the report isn't to point the finger. It's to say, how do we get back on track? How do we still deliver this project successfully? So stay in a deliverable focus mindset. What is the current status of the project? And what does that mean for the completion of the project? So let's say I'll go back to that 10-week project and we're in week 3 and we're already $2,000 over budget. What does that mean for the end of our project? There's some math that we can do to figure that out. And it doesn't mean that if we do everything right from here on out, it does not mean that at the end of the project we're going to be $2,000 over, because the overage trends upward as time goes on. It actually impacts other things, and so we don't end up being 2,000. We end up being a significantly higher amount over budget. For anything that you have a variance for, anything that's not on track, always include a recovery plan. What is your plan? And maybe you also can include the math associated with, if I fix this, then what does that look like for forecasting at the end of my project? Project management, luckily, has had some pretty genius people work out, some great tools for project managers. And one of those tools happens to be using earned value reporting. And it's math that helps you to figure out where your variances are, and it also helps you figure out what methods would be most successful to getting things back on track, forecasting for the end of your project. Am I going to be, or how much over budget am I going to be? You can literally whittle it down to a number, an approximate number, of course. And also, how far behind schedule am I going to be if I'm over schedule, or if I'm behind schedule? Project managers generate these official progress reports at predetermined intervals, throughout the project. And it could be based on the contract, or maybe it's a grant agreement that you have that will determine the time frame that you do those. And team members are to provide the progress information to the project manager in the form of status reports, and a progress report is usually required when submitting payment requests or invoices. Projections for final completion of a for management action can be tracked by an integrated cost schedule system or a technique known as this earned value management, which I'm just referenced to you. The elements of the earned value measurement helps us calculate information for forecasting. So we're going to get into some examples here in a second. Different types of reports that you might do. And remember, this is about delivering difficult information. So, you know, no project goes perfectly. There's always things that we could do better. So even if you don't have any really bad stuff to report throughout the life of your project, doing a lessons learned and being able to say, I could have done this better, I will plan better later, next time. Even that is something that, you know, you're not going to get criticized for. You should get a pat on the back for something like that. This is a typical outline of a project report. So I mentioned this earlier. Maybe you include an executive summary, but maybe you also include graphics for those that would prefer. What is the impact of any previous recommendations that were made? What are your baselines? And we're talking about baselines in multiple areas, baselines for scope, for schedule, for budget. So you have your baseline. This is what we had planned to do. And then report your actual metrics. These are my actuals. The difference between the two is the variance or the deviation. Also tell your readers, the people reading this report, what did you find out? You're not just reporting this data. Oh yeah, I have this variance. You're going to do your research and find out why this variance occurred, because you don't want it to continue to occur. You need to address it. So what is your root cause analysis? What is your recommendation to get things back on track? And what does that mean for the project? So do your forecasting math. What are any open issues that we have? And then looking ahead, hey, you know, look out for this risk. Here's what we're expecting next week, things like that. This is just a typical report outline. When we're talking about metrics and variances and things like that, project teams should only collect measurements if they can be leveraged to help manage the project. Otherwise, there may not be a reason to gather anything other than the basic cost, effort, duration information that are going to be required and utilized at the organizational level. But project measurements are important, but the most value in capturing the data is gained if the metrics are used to drive improvements on an organizational-wide basis. The accumulation of consistent metrics from all projects can be used to drive process improvement throughout the company. Ultimately, the information can be used to create a set of best practices and standards that are going to help your organization. We know the expression, don't kill the messenger. It indicates that the person delivering the bad news is not the same person responsible for causing the bad news. In our day-to-day activity as project managers, we find that the recipient of bad news, the managers, project stakeholders, customers, sometimes forget this and react inappropriately. It's a given that the project manager is responsible for the success of the project. However, there are events that that could arise that may be totally out of anyone's control. For example, there could be shifts in management at the client location. They could introduce delays, or maybe new technology is taking longer to implement than anticipated. So there's a variety of reasons why projects would go sideways. There's some different techniques for delivering bad news. And this is not one of them that you're going to want to practice. So the grenade is where the messenger walks into a crowded room, typically full of executives, delivers the bad news with all of its horrendous consequences without any warning, and then leaves. This is totally unacceptable, ineffective, and not sustainable, primarily for the project manager's career. So don't do the grenade. Then there's the silent treatment. This is where the messenger chooses not to deliver the message. The reasoning may be that they feel the problem is going to resolve itself, or they don't want to deal with the subsequent activity necessary to resolve the situation. This approach, not recommended. Now we have the trial balloon. And this has been the most effective method I've seen used. The messenger meets with a couple of stakeholders at a time, laying out the facts of the situation. Hey, let me pass something by you approach. This allows for additional options to be considered, further information to be introduced. For example, more resources may be available that the project manager didn't know were available, and crafting of the final message to occur prior to introducing it to the entire group. The result is that the messenger doesn't stand alone. Multiple options have been considered, and the bad news is not sensationalized with this method. So the best way to give bad news is don't have to give it. Don't have any to give. So how do we do that? We should do a better job of tracking the status of our projects, taking the temperature, and that starts from nearly day one of our project. And that we can do that through earned value analysis. And earned value analysis is something that I love, 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 love. I'm so grateful that someone has come up with this that allows us to really track the temperature of our projects. So when do you perform earned value analysis? When do you do these analyses? You do it throughout the life of the project, but how often you do it really depends on the length of the project. If you have a multi-year project, maybe you only do earned value analysis once a month. If you have a multi-month project, then you probably want to do it once a week. And there's some information that you need. You need to know what the earned value is, the planned value, and the actual costs. Once you have those three pieces of information, you can literally do all of the rest of the math to do your cost performance index, your schedule performance index, and all your forecasting. Okay, so I'm going to give you some equations here. First, I want to define what earned value is, planned value, and actual cost. Actual cost is the amount of money we have spent up to the point that we're I should have, based on the work that should have been done by now, I should have spent this amount of money based on my budget. So it's the amount of work that should have been completed at the budgeted rate. And then you have earned value, which is the amount of work that's actually been completed, not that had planned to be completed, but how much work has actually been done at the budgeted rate. Okay, so as long as you are able to obtain those three pieces of information, notice that all of the other items in these equations are one of these three items. Okay, and then I have another page of equations for you too, and these are forecasting. Okay, here's one that you haven't seen yet. BAC, it means budget at completion. When I say BAC, it means what is the total amount of the budget that we had planned originally. Okay, that's what BAC means. And then we have planned duration. So how long did this was this project going to take according to our schedule? Okay, and these CPI and the SPI, I'll go back a slide. That's where these come from. Here's the SPI, here's the CPI, cost performance index. So with that in mind, I'm going to show you a graphical representation of earned value analysis. Okay, here's what it tells us. Let's pretend that we have little slash marks here on this axis that has dollar signs attached to it. So maybe this is $0 right here. Maybe this is $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and so forth. We also have a time here. So maybe this is 0. So the project is just getting started at this point. Maybe this is 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and so forth. When you're able to plot something on a graphic like this, and we're just taking our same numbers, our actual costs, our planned value, our earned value, we're taking those numbers and we're just plotting them in you can do this in an Excel spreadsheet, but we're getting this graphic that's called an S-curve graphic. And the reason it's called an S-curve is because if you look at the planned value line, you get this wavy little line that kind of mimics a stretched out S, okay? So that's why it's called that. Here you've got the actual costs in the dashed blue line, and earned value is in red, solid line, and your planned value is the dashed green line. So planned value, because it's the budget and because it's the planned time frame, we can actually carry that number throughout the entire project, through the end of this timeline down here, because we know what our costs are going to be throughout the life of the project because we have a budget. Okay, it's only when activities are being completed, work is being done on the project, that we can record these other two items, the actual cost and the earned value. Okay, so planned value is always, this is what I expected to happen because I have a budget and I have a schedule. All of this is pre-planning before we go into execution of the project. It's only during execution of the project that we can start recording actual costs and earned value. Earned value is the amount of work that's been done at the planned budget rate. Okay, so we're going back to these numbers, but this reflects the work that's been completed. Okay, so they end up being plotted out on a graphic such as this, and you can clearly see that this is the amount that we should have spent at this time, and you can see the amount of work that hasn't been done. Because we are, let's say this gap here represented 1 full week. This would tell you that we are a week behind schedule. We're a week behind schedule. And here's what's interesting. Not only are we a week behind schedule, but here's where our costs are. I mean, this is what our budget was supposed to be, but here's where our actual costs are. So there's a cost variance here. So you can see where the schedule variance is. You can see where the cost variance is. This is called an S-curve. So I want to take you through a couple sample projects just to show you what earned value analysis can do for you throughout the life of the project, and it can help diminish the need to have to deliver bad news. Here's an example of a project, and unfortunately this project only shows 1 line, even though we have 3 lines here. But what it's showing you is that this project is the perfect project. The planned value, what we had planned to spend and how long we had planned for them to take, actually worked out exactly like we had wanted. So that's why you only see 1 line, because they're actually all running together. So here's what these projects will be. We will have a 12-month project. These will all be 12-month projects. And we're spending, what are we spending? We're spending $1,000 a month, okay, on average. So that's what we're dealing with. So let's look at the first project that actually has all 3 lines here. So this is S curve B. Here's what we see. Our planned value is going to be a solid line that runs through this graphic for every single one of these because our budget is $1,000 a month, and we know that there's a fixed duration on this project of 12 months, okay? So you see this progressive line that continues to grow each month. We could guesstimate the amount of money spent at each of these, but let's just figure it out at month 9 because that's where this stops, okay? So in month 9, we've got earned value of $4,000 and we've got actual costs of $7,500. And in month 9, if we're spending $1,000 a month, we really should be at $9,000 expenditure. So technically we're under budget. However, based on the amount of work that's been done, in order to catch up, we're going to spend a whole lot more money. So yes, technically we're under budget. We should have spent $9,000. We've only spent $7,500. However, only $4,000 worth of work has been completed. $4,000 worth from the budgeted amount. Our actual costs, as you know, can be much greater than that. So this is bad news. In fact, this is really bad news to have to deliver. Here's some more bad news. Now this one you might think is even a little worse because we're over budget and way under on our earned value. At month 7, we should have spent $7,000. We've actually spent $8,700, and the amount of work that we've done has been $4,500. So we are literally not half, but maybe a third behind schedule. So earned value, think of earned value as part of the schedule. Here's another example. We've got earned value that is higher than what we were supposed to have spent. Actual costs that are less than what we were supposed to have spent. This is a dream project. This never happens. So our work productivity is higher than we expected it to be, but our costs are lower. So what did we do here? Did we bring on volunteers? That's one way to do it. So very interesting. This is a type of graphic that you don't really see very often. This is the kind of project that I absolutely would want to manage. And this is another interesting project. So you have, yes, you are over budget. Your actual costs are over. You should be at 8,000 right now. You're at 10,000. But the effort that you're putting in is also more than it should be. Really, you're only $500 off on here. You're only $500 over budget, which isn't a lot considering we're ahead of schedule. And yes, we are a little over budget, but the gap between the two isn't that great. So, and you can see also that the costs run pretty consistent with the work, which means this project manager did a really good job with planning and anticipating where costs would hit. Here's a really weird project. So here we have a project that has almost no effort in the very beginning, but look at how the costs are jumping up. Whenever you have little to no increase in effort, earned value, but you have a big increase in actual costs, and it happens here again, that usually indicates that maybe there's a lot of material that you're ordering, but we can't do the work until the material arrives. So here's a great example. We order the material in the first month. It takes 2 months to be delivered, but we've paid for it, or we're paying for it. So that's why nothing is getting accomplished until between month 3 and 4. Between month 3 and 4, a ton of work is done, as you can see by this high trajectory line. And then almost no work gets done for 3 more months, but our costs are rising. So we're probably waiting for materials again. So that's really interesting. This person, not that they planned poorly, but I think that they could have maybe represented their numbers a little differently. What's interesting though is it looks like she's taking the temperature of the project every couple months, 3 or 4 months, and then she is able to get things back on track. So she's very successful, she or he, very successful at getting things back on track. In fact, you can see that in month 8, we were supposed to spend $8,000. We actually did spend $8,000, and the effort we gave was $8,000 worth. So we are at 100% right here, but it takes a lot of effort to get things back on track. So some more consistent earned value analysis would help that along. So those are just some examples of what those look like and how, if we do those more consistently on a regular basis, we can better control our actual costs and our earned value and make sure that we're keeping things on track so that we don't have to deliver bad news. Hopefully you got a lot out of this training. Please contact us at NCTS if you'd like to learn more about any project management training or consulting for your organization.